It's the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast with your hosts, the Wolf and Action Jackson, who are keeping rock alive by talking classic rock, hard rock, progressive rock, heavy metal, 80s music, early MTV, UK vs. US chart success, and much more. This is the home of classic album and live concert reviews and your place for interviews with artists and legends. You're rocking with the Wolf. Out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 218 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. Brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf, and I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the USA, Mr. Gary Action Jackson. And we appreciate everybody tuning in last week for our take on the Vision Quest soundtrack as it's turning 40. A movie released in early 1985 that was maybe aimed at teenagers, maybe didn't have the biggest box office in the world, but has continued to be a cult classic in a big way because of the music used in the film and on the soundtrack. Talk about rising star Madonna with a couple of hits, including the big Crazy For You, Journey pulling Only the Young off of Frontiers to put in there, Red Rider's Lunatic Fringe, some other great songs, and we had a lot of great feedback on that, so we really appreciate you listening to that one. But this week, we go to one of the biggest, most classic, most influential albums of all time. One that was very big for us growing up and is just huge around the world. Talk about Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, which is turning 50 this February, and it's the one and only double album of original material ever released by Led Zeppelin. And at this point, Led Zeppelin had a ton of power in that they just set up their own record label, Swan Song, headed by their manager Peter Grant, where not only they would get all of their stuff released, but they also had other artists on like Bad Company, like Detective. They'd sold a ton of records, especially in America, though they are an English band and they do fine in the UK. Led Zeppelin are primarily an American phenomenon. They toured a lot more in the US than they did in the UK, and their record sales are much, much, much stronger in the US than they are in the UK. For instance, this is double platinum in the UK. It's 16 times platinum in the US. And being Americans who are also Anglophiles when it comes to their music, this is one that was huge for me and Jackson. So as it's turning 50, we thought we better go in and do a track-by-track review of this one. But because it is a double album, we're going to break it up into two parts. This show is going to focus on the first record, or the first CD, if you will. It's only 6 songs, but they're an epic and amazing 6 songs. And then episode number 219 is going to focus on the second album, sides 3 and 4, or the second compact disc. Kind of depends on what generation you are for you to decide how you see the record. But the bottom line is, this is an all-time classic. This is one of our favorites, so we're going to have a lot of notes, a lot of things to say, and we want you to buckle in and have a good time. But first, we do have a little bit of business to take care of. As always, we like to mention we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a family of over 100 different shows. You can learn more at pantheonpodcast.com or follow on socials at PantheonPods. And we love giving out shout-outs to our incredible sponsor, rarevinyl.com, who's based in the UK, folks. It's rarevinyl.co.uk over there, but they ship all over the world. They also procure collections from all over the world. So there's a lot of great Japanese stuff on there. There's a lot of great European listings on there, and US listings, and of course lots of UK stuff. And you better believe they have an amazing selection of Led Zeppelin stuff. I think it was just last year that they had the blue lettered Led Zeppelin 1 album, which can go for a couple of $1,000 anyway. But they've got the classic stuff. They've got the rare singles. They've got posters. They've got the new releases too. The stuff that's 180 grams and has been recreated for you. All sorts of amazing treasures at rarevinyl.com. Over 250,000 items in stock. And what's great is they gave us a code, UGLY. So when you go, when you buy stuff, you can save 10% off. But it's not just for one thing. It's for one entire order. So you want to buy all the original Led Zeppelin albums in good condition from rare vinyl, you can do that. And yeah, that may cost you hundreds of quid, hundreds of bucks, hundreds of real, whatever you deal with. But you use the code UGLY and you're going to get 10% off the entire order, which may just pay for your shipping or pay for a couple of things you buy. So go to rarevinyl.com, find something you love. Your record collection is going to thank you. Now back to Physical Graffiti. This made a huge impression on me when I was young. Back in the day when CDs cost $15 and a double was about $30, that's a big investment. And if I made it in the late 80s, that means my $30 was probably costing me $80 or in today's money, something like that. You had to be CD worthy. Just like Elaine on Seinfeld had to find guys sponge worthy, you had to be CD worthy. You're not taking a flyer on a band that just had one hit song. And I knew once I had saved up $30 that I really needed to get the one and only double album by Led Zeppelin, because it may have had Kashmir on it that I knew, but I figure there's going to be other amazing stuff on there as well that's not played on the radio as much. And not only is it not played on the radio much, but they didn't even play most of these live, which is kind of a sin. It's kind of crazy, but we'll get into why of all that on the episode. So this is a fun one. Sit back, get ready. We're talking Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin as it turns 50 here on The Wolf. So we've decided to attack Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti as it turns 50. And unlike Exile on Main Street, we've decided to give it a 2-show treatment instead of just one. Could cram it all into one, but I feel like there's so much going on and there's so many songs on here. Again, there's 15 compared to like 20 on Exile, but these songs are so epic. And it had 2 release dates anyway, right? February 24th, 75 in the US, February 28th, 75 in the UK, which warrants a 2-episode show. Before we get into Swan Song and when they released it and all that, let's get into the Action Jackson personal journey with Physical Graffiti. How did you discover this album, and what happened to you after you did?
I think that I don't remember ever having a copy of this thing. I think probably the most of it would be either what I heard on the radio. Obviously, Kashmir was all over the place, and the tracks that they had on the box set that came out in 1990,
right?
Which I think was not all of this. And I'd have to go back and look, because there's a couple on here that I'm like, this is a lot better than I remember it. Why wasn't it more imprinted on me?
Yeah, I feel like only 8 or something like that made it onto the box set originally. I could be wrong about that number, but
this one had the same problem that it probably had in 1975. It's a double album, and double album means not double the price, but like 1.5 times
at least.
Yeah, the regular price. So it's like, ooh, that's a big investment to get into.
Yeah, 8 tracks from Physical Graffiti appeared on the box set, and then 3 more on the remasters, which was kind of like the leftovers.
Yeah,
and then the remainder was on the box set too in 1993, which I never picked up. I didn't pick up the remasters either. I just thought the box set was so awesome. However, I did pick up the original 2-disc pretty early on in my CD collecting career. It was 1987 that I started to collect CDs. My very first one ever was Zeppelin 1, and my second and third was The Song Remains the Same soundtrack.
Okay.
And then
that's solid.
I'd say within the first 30 and probably within the first 20, I got the double album Physical Graffiti, which was put out on CD, not that long before I got it, really. It took them a while to do it. And they left a couple little things off of there at the end of, what was it? Well, at the end of one of these songs when they were like, you could say, hey, I think that's the one, or whatever.
Okay.
That's not on there. They took that 12 seconds out on this. But then when they remastered it, of course, I had to pick that up because I wanted to have it, in high quality. Because this is, if you're going to have a collection of Led Zeppelin songs and you're going to pay a little extra to make sure, okay, well, I want to make sure I get not only the best recording of it, but I want to see the outtakes and kind of where they were before they became the songs we know. That was kind of a must-have, if you ask me.
Yeah, that original one that you had, that it looked like there was a booklet. Was it the booklet decent?
Not really, no.
Okay. And that was the problem with those albums at that time. When they came out, it was like you're just going to listen to the music. You don't really,
Yeah.
oh, that's horrendous. Oh,
Yeah.
there's nothing in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like whatever. You just want to hear the music, no one cares. But I mean, when this thing came out, it was a huge deal because it had the die cut album cover and you could
Windows.
mess with
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And I mean, just to have that original, I mean, I don't know who's got it, but if you do and it still works, I would love to see that. I can't imagine how much it cost to put out because this was a one of one thing.
Yeah, and it took a little while. I mean, I feel like it was supposed to come out earlier, maybe, but they kind of it took them a little while to get the printing right because, yeah, I mean, that was part of Zeppelin's power was that Peter Grant was like, Atlantic is going to pay for all printing and packaging costs. So they come up with the third album, which has the wheel that spins and all the stuff kind of behind it. This is not unlike that in that it has the 16 windows on the cover that have the letters for physical graffiti in it. But back in the day, you could take that out and slide in covers. It would have famous people like W.C. Fields in it and maybe Marilyn Monroe and stuff like that. It seems to me the Stones did the same thing for some girls, and then they got in trouble for it. Like, you don't have Lucille Ball's permission to use her face. You don't have Marilyn Monroe's permission to use her face. So they kind of, they had to change it to like more generic ones or change it to pictures of the boys. And I've got that one. I think I have a physical graffiti old one. It's probably just not in very good shape because in the 2000s, early 2000s, LPs were dirt cheap. Like people were throwing them away, practically giving them away. But yeah, and so I picked up some classics that now would probably be worth a ton more. Of course, they've kind of recreated them, reprinted them, so you get new versions of them now.
Yeah, you can buy those at like Target, and I think even like department stores have them with the little record player too. But that's not the same thing.
Not the same thing, no. But still, also at this time, they decided to create Swan Song Records. Which was the name of a song that Jimmy was working on at the time. He couldn't quite get it finished. And so he just kind of put it away for a while. Eventually, it became Midnight Moonlight with The Firm on their first album. But they liked the name, kind of like the song Houses of the Holy wasn't finished quite. Or it was, but it didn't. It sounded too much like Dancing Days.
Right.
So they left it off the Houses of the Holy album. But they liked the name, so they kept the name House of the Holy and left the song for this album.
And so maybe that's something to get into now also. So they go and do this record, or they're going to go do a record, and they've got too much material for one record, but not enough for two records.
Right.
So they go back to, hey, we've got some stuff in the vault that we haven't really either they left off, it wasn't totally done. Let's go back and dust that off. I was watching an interview with Rod Nevison, when he was talking about like, yeah, when you put out records, it had to be like 20 minutes aside ish. Or other than that, you were going to just lose the audio quality. So they had to, you couldn't like, oh, let's just put a couple extra songs on there. No, that was it. So interesting that they just decided to hell with it. Let's just put out two and grab some songs from the old days.
Well, of course, Nevison worked with Kiss on Crazy Crazy Nights, so he must be good.
He's got the magic touch.
Oh yeah, no. So yeah, I mean, look, they went to Headley Grange in January and February of 1974. I guess in late '73, John Paul Jones was kind of tired and disillusioned, and he's got a wife, he's got kids, he's got a great big house, and so he kind of told Peter Grant, I think I'm going to quit.
Which you can't go to.
Yeah, exactly. You never see, right?
Exactly, because you're on the road or you're in the studio or you're on the road again. But, just as a quick aside, the whole Headley Grange thing. Okay, so we've got these state-of-the-art studios, right? You've got Abbey Road, you've got these other places. But you know what? No. We want to go to this mansion out in the country and you figure out how to set it up like a recording studio. Oh, okay, sure, let's do that. Why wouldn't I?
Well, if they're in London, there's distractions, there's press, there's girls, there's booze and drugs, there's girls, there's other rock concerts to go to, and there's girls and stuff. And so they figured, let's just go away where we can just concentrate, just us, and do our thing. And they used the Rolling Stones, mobile recording thing. Before, especially in 71 at Headley Grange during the Led Zeppelin IV recording sessions, because Ian Stewart formerly of the Rolling Stones, and their road manager decided, yeah, I'll bring it up and set it up and show you how it works. And then they get a jam going, which, was laying around for a while, but then finds its way onto this album. But the bottom line is the 74 Headley Grange sessions were killer. They made all this brand new stuff that was super riff heavy, super fun, because Houses of the Holy had been a little bit of a departure. Like, we could dip our toes in reggae, we can dip our toes in some prog, we can dip our toes in other things, because mostly everything else was folk and blues for the most part, and the other albums. Then they experiment a little bit. They realized they need to take a little time off at the end of 73 for JPJ's, sanity. They come back. He's a little late getting there, maybe, but John Bonham is in good shape. He's ready to help. Jimmy is coming up with some killer stuff. And I'll go over it while we kind of go song by song here. But Jimmy in 1975 was the rock god. Is the reason we tell people who's your favorite, who's the greatest, and say Jimmy Page. That's why. When we look at him in like the 80s and the 90s, when he's still pretty good, we can say, well, that's Jimmy. He's not doing his Jimmy thing, but he's still awesome. Or you see him at 79 Nebworth when he's super skinny and he's just sweating.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still pretty good. But 75 is like the last big recording that shows him just badass as ever. Plus, he was wearing the black dragon suit. But I'm talking about using the slide, using the bow, using the black and white Dan Electro that he likes, using the Les Paul, using the double neck red Gibson. Height of his power. And when you see him play some of this stuff, you're like, oh my God, why was there any debate on who was the greatest? Now it's easy because he kind of fell off for a while. He went away, and then when he came back, he wasn't amazing. And then in 94, they do Unleaded. He's great, but he's not really doing anything new. He's reworking some stuff, but the really cool rework stuff is acoustic. So, yeah, it's just, he's not the same after 1980, after the death of John Bonham, in my opinion. But this is before all that.
And like we talked about before, he did Death Wish 2. The soundtrack. He did The Firm. He did Outrider. So he did a couple of things, but nothing like this. And you were kind of always waiting for him to come out with the new, okay, now he's back. Now he's doing his thing again. And once the Zeppelin remasters started in the early 90s, like that's his main focus now.
That's right. Keeping the flame alive for Zeppelin, making sure it's always presented properly, in a good light and all that kind of stuff. Oh, we've got some video stuff. Okay, well, let's put those together on some DVDs. Charge the hell out of people for those. No, it's true. But yeah, so 28 minutes is not new. They had more than two. They had 2.5, maybe even more than that, close to 3 album sides, and kind of needed a fourth, but maybe half of another one. So yeah, they kind of went back between the 72 Stargroves, which may have been Houses of the Holy, 71 Headley Grange. There's also some 72 Olympic sessions, which would have been from Houses of the Holy, and some stuff from all the way back from Led Zeppelin III from Island Studios in 1970. So it was like Island Studios in 70 and 71, Headley Grange in 71, and Stargroves in 72. This is like where they're pulling stuff from that's just kind of in the vault. We're not sure what to do with it. Maybe we can work it up. But I'll try to point out where everything was recorded, because for the most part, the 74 Headley Grange stuff is killer. And the other stuff is, some of it's good, some of it's kind of like, okay, I understand why you didn't release this before.
And it's kind of cool too, because this is not a greatest hits record, but it's kind of it's a retrospective of what they've done, because they had the old stuff that they're presenting as new, but it still has the vibe of the old sessions.
And they were just firing all cylinders. And honestly, the record company was doing fine, because you signed Bad Company, who was doing great. You signed Detective, who had great potential, had Michael DePar on lead singer. That was it. Maggie Bell was the kind of English Janis Joplin that they had on their label, so, and it was really just kind of a showing their power. Like, they already kind of had this power with Atlantic Records. They made Atlantic do all the stuff for the cover for Zeppelin III, but now it's like, yeah, we have our own record company and we're on there, and yes, Atlantic has to pay for all packaging, all shipping, all distribution, but it worked because despite the delays with the packaging thing, it's the first album to ship platinum.
Oh, jeez.
Ship platinum. Because platinum didn't come out wasn't created till 75, I think it was. And, like how the Eagles' greatest hits was like the first album ever to go platinum, and Kiss Alive was not too long after that, or something like that. This was the first one that shipped, like, yes, we want 500,000 copies in America so we can sell them. And eventually it went 8 times platinum.
They shipped 500,000 copies before anybody even heard one song off this record.
Yeah.
That's how big this band was.
Well, it's technically 16 times platinum, but because it's a double album, it's 8 million units of the double album were set. Still, it's amazing. And in the England, of course, it didn't do nearly as well. Led Zeppelin is so much more of a phenomenon in the United States than they are in the UK. I mean, double platinum England, pretty good, right? No, it's 16 times platinum in the US. And double New Zealand, double Australia. But, you know, all those add up. All those other countries add up to like 1 million. And then there's 8 million sold in America. The remaster that went out in 2015 went to number 11 on Billboard. That's kind of crazy because it's a triple CD. How can that go number 11? Went to number 1 in the UK and the US. I think it went straight to number 1 in the UK. I think it started at 3 in the US and worked its way up, but it was also number 1 in Canada and 2 in places like Australia and Spain. Top 5 in places around the world. But this to me is the Led Zeppelin connoisseurs album. Everyone always says, well, what's their best album? I would always say Physical Graffiti. A lot of people would say 4 because there's no skip tracks on there. Start to finish, it's all awesome. Some people like 3 because it's different. It's got the folk, but it's also got the hard rockin' immigrant song, whatever. But to me, this is their best because it has some of their very best songs. It has great songs that they never played live for some reason. And then it's got some weird ones that, yeah, okay, if it were a 7 or 8 song album like Houses of the Holy or like Led Zeppelin IV or like In Through the Outdoor or Presence, which are both, I think, 7-song albums, then you're like, oh, yeah, that shouldn't be on there. But when you've got 4 album sides, 15 songs, 82 minutes, then it's fine to put something in there that maybe wouldn't be a radio hit or wouldn't be something that you want to play every year. I get it. But I think top to bottom, and I think, honestly, the first 3 sides are unbelievable. And if it was the CD era, if they just put out the first 3 sides, it would be regarded as the greatest album ever to me.
Well, unfortunately, this is pretty much going to be it for them, right? As you would know them, because I mean, they do this. They put out Song Remains the Same, which is that's like a greatest hits deal for the movie.
And a soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah. Then they do Presence, which I don't think is anybody's favorite.
Right.
And then In Through the Outdoor. But at that point in time, Jimmy is, he's hanging on by a thread. So to me, this is like the last album they made where they're just firing on all cylinders. You mentioned Swan Song. They did Swan Song, I think, because it was a feather in their cap. We have our own deal.
Yep.
But also because it's like, we're going to do whatever the hell we want. And Atlantic, you're going to take it with a big smile and then distribute it. So there's no like record company interference on this deal.
Well, that's right. And that's what is another thing that's so special about it. Rolling Stones had Rolling Stone Records before they had Swan Song. However, I still think that Atlantic had some, I mean, was it the Stones' idea to do Ain't Too Proud to Beg, or did somebody suggest that? I don't know. It seemed like Ahmet Ertegun still had some pull over the stone and say, okay, well, you need to release this first, or you need to maybe try this or something like that. You can't put out a song called Starfucker. You got to put Star on there, something like that. But Led Zeppelin was completely left by themselves. No one told them what to record. No one told them which songs to put out as singles and which not. Of course, they weren't really a big singles band anyway, but they still put some out.
Yeah, that was an interesting deal too, because they never wanted to be thought of as a, don't pick this thing apart, listen to it for the whole thing. This is an album, not a one single track deal.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously it is. And these songs are long. I mean, 15 songs at 82 minutes. They're at least 5 minutes long on average anyway. And then, the first one's 4 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 11 minutes. Longest song they ever did. 4 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 8.5 minutes for Kashmir. 8:44 for In the Light, then a short Bronnier, then a 5 minute Down by the Seaside. 6.5, 10 years gone. They get a little shorter on the 4th side, as some of these were just kind of somewhat cobbled together. But
yeah,
for the most part, and look, critics love this stuff. I mean, Metacritic, 97 out of 100. You never see that. I mean, a good one is in the 80s, right? So a lot of 10 out of 10s, a lot of 5 stars. Not everybody, of course, but for the most part, people, especially down through the years have regarded this as one of the greatest rock albums of ever. You got a top 100, top 1,000, top whatever. This is going to be high up on the list.
Yeah. I mean, you might say that one or two of these songs aren't your favorite, but you can't say that anything on this record I don't think sucks. Oh, that's terrible. Why did they do that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's solid. It's a solid four sides.
It's unbelievable. And I'm telling you, the first three sides are amazing, amazing. Now, all the songs, for the most part, are written by Jimmy and Robert, but there are some instances where Jonesy helps out or all four of them get credit, and I will be sure to kind of point that out along the way. But yeah, I mean, I think that they worked hard from 68 to 73. There was a lot of album tour, lots of tours of America, but now their success was catching up with them, and they couldn't really tour in England because of the tax situation. They were kind of tax outlaws, if you will, and didn't play there for a number of years. So it's like, if you go through their records, 68 through 73, there's a ton of shows, okay? 74, they don't tour. Right, because they start off the year, need a break, they record this, but then they put together Swan Song and start to deal with legal stuff and other artists and all that kind of stuff. So 75 comes along, and they do an abbreviated tour. No, they do Rotterdam and Brussels in January before the album comes out in February. Then they start across the United States, and they do a bunch of dates in February and March before they end back at Earl's Court for 5 nights. I think they only had 3 nights, but they sold out 3 nights in like 4 hours or something. Like, okay, well, we got to add a couple of dates. So they did. They added a couple of dates on the front end. They did 5 sold out days at Earl's Court, and that's where the kind of video that I was telling you about comes from. But they played arenas. They played Long Beach Arena, the San Diego Sports Arena, the Memorial in Dallas. I mean, and a couple nights in a lot of places. Coliseum in Seattle, the Forum 3 nights in Inglewood. You know, I mean, they played big shows here. They started in Bloomington, Indiana, of all places.
Okay.
Played Madison Square Garden and Nassau Coliseum.
Is that the one? There's that story that John Paul Jones tells about playing at the Forum. I think it was from this tour where Bonham's got some like Firebird or something that he's just gotten, and they're drag racing down the Sunset Strip. They get pulled over by the cops in like 38 seconds. Mm-hmm. Bonham's got all of them under the hood pointing out, I redid this. I've got but hey, you guys are coming to the show, right?
Oh, well, here's some
I'll
tickets.
Get you yeah, here's some tickets. He's like, this dude was like, the cops walked away like he was the greatest dude on the face of the earth.
And nice. He was, right? Yeah. But
correct.
The fact of the matter is then, okay, so they did a good tour in early 75, and that was it. They didn't tour 76 at all, because they did have Presence come out later in the year. They had The Song Remains the Same come out earlier in the year, so they're kind of making money off the movie and the soundtrack or the live album. Then eventually Presence comes out later in the year, but I think Robert was in a car accident. It'd been hard for him to tour. So 77, they tour. They do a pretty robust tour of America that ends in Oakland, like where the Raiders and the A's played at Alameda County Coliseum. 2 nights there. But then I think Carrick had died, so it's like, okay, well, now that's over. And then in 78, they don't tour at all either. So 74, 76, and 78, they don't tour full stop. 75, they do a decent little tour of America, plus 5 nights at Earl's Court. And 77, they do a pretty robust tour of America, 6 nights at Madison Square Garden, 5 nights at the Forum, plus some football stadiums. Played Tampa Stadium, the Big Sombrero. Kind of impressive. But then, they quit. So from 74 to 78, they really only tour twice in those 5 years. Pretty decent, robust tours of America. But if you want to see them in England or Europe, you're kind of screwed. You only get a couple shows.
Sorry, Europe.
Yeah, I mean, they loved them so much. There's so many groupies here just all over Led Zeppelin. And we'll get into that on one of the songs on side 4.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jim McCarthy of the Yardbirds, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
But let's jump in because there's just so much to go over. Number 1, Custard Pie, starting off the whole album. What's your impressions of this as an opener, as a song on itself, and how do you start, this epic?
Let's just go into this thing. I mean, there's no bass. right? So it's the what's he playing? The clavinet.
Clavinet. I
So
didn't
that
really realize that because it sounds like a bass.
yeah, it's kind of funky right off the bat. And I go back again and again to we love Jimmy Page, but you cannot underestimate that what John Paul Jones is doing as the utility infielder. Like he's always got tricks up his sleeve. He's doing different stuff. I would have never thought to put this on the record. It sounds funky. It sounds cool. I know that it was inspired by, and that's a whole nother side conversation on who wrote what.
Right, right.
A whole bunch of these different blues guys, including one of the guys, Bucka White, Shake 'em Down.
And Blind Boy Fuller, who wants some of your pie.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother thing too, because they were talking about like, oh, you're ripping these guys off. And I guess technically you are, but the dudes that did it originally, they didn't make the song up. It was these are all like traditional blues songs. There's only 12 bars there. Somebody did something similar to this. But anyway, this is a really cool track. The harmonica, when he gets into it, is just sick also. Plant is just banging it on the harmonica. I love this song.
Okay, I'm going to say this. Try not to get made fun of by Zeppelin heads out there.
Okay.
This might be my favorite Led Zeppelin song.
Okay.
And I think it demonstrates the power of Led Zeppelin as well as anything else in their catalog. As far as Jimmy comes out with that killer riff.
Yeah.
And it's not super precise. When they say Jimmy's sloppy, he's not on a metronome here. He's kind of doing what he feels.
Right.
That clavinet by John Paul Jones, which for the longest time I thought was a bass, him going boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. I'm like, wow, he's really good at that damn bass.
Line.
It is a bass line, yeah. Pop. Killer drums from from John Bonham. And then Plant is just doing his thing. This is the best opener of any of their albums. This is killer Led Zeppelin. And they never played it live.
Interesting.
Never. There's a note, right? Of course, there's always a note. That in 75, it was never played live. They played some of it in rehearsals. And they performed a little bit of it during their acoustic set in Houston, May 21st, 1977. That's how big Zeppelin are, that you know exactly when they ever played snippets of it. In concert. And then the three surviving members reunited with Jason sitting on his drums for his wedding reception in 1990. And they played a 20-minute rendition of the song. Not public, but I think some of the videos gotten out somewhere. And then, of course, when Plant does Tall Cool 1 and does some sampling.
Right, yeah.
You can hear it on there.
So why are people going to make fun of you over this?
Well, because no one's going to pick Custard Pie as their best song. They're going to pick one of the epics. They're going to pick something from Zeppelin 4. They'll pick Kashmir off here. They'll pick In Your Time of Dying or something as an epic. They'll do Wonton Song or something. They'll say no. They'll say, what about Stairway? What about Whole Lot of Love? They'll all say that.
And you can say that, but like especially Stairway to Heaven, there's a reason why it says don't play that in the guitar store. Just enough already. This is one of those songs where it's like, you hear it and you say, why wasn't this one of the big ones? Because it's so funky, it's so cool, and to start the record off, it's always got to be tough to pick what's your lead-in track. I think they did a hell of a job with this.
They did, and then Page's solo, it's not overdone, it's not crazy, it fits the song perfect, and it comes to a head right at the right place, and then and back into you can see him like gyrating his head back and forth to this kind of thing here.
Yeah.
I can't believe, I mean, I know that they had a great catalog of 5 albums before this comes out. And then when it comes out, you can't play the whole new album, especially when it's 80 minutes. And there's some stuff that they want to play and need to play. But the fact that they never played this is baffling to me. I think it's an amazing song. I think it's a perfect display of this is who Zeppelin are. Come out, punch you in the face, killer drums. an amazing bass line, even though it's a clavinet, and maybe that
Yeah.
had something to do with it. Did he not want to play the clavinet on stage? I don't think that's true because I saw him at Earl's Court. And if you think Jimmy had an interesting outfit with the Black Dragon suit, you should have seen what JPJ was wearing. It was like a satin, custom-made jester's jacket. I mean,
It's very strange.
I hope he still has it. I doubt it still fits, but I hope he still has it somewhere. I don't know. I just think this is, you say, like, put on some Zeppelin, you put this on, and you're in for the ride here.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course that was recorded at the 74 Headley Grange sessions because those were so strong. Now the next one, The Rover, this was at 72 Stargroves, which makes it a House of the Holy Take. By the way, Mick Jagger owned Stargroves. It was a estate, right? It's an estate out in the English countryside in Hampshire, but then that's why they can use the Rolling Stones mobile studio if you're using Mick's house. A family owned it from like the 1500s to the 1800s, and then some kind of army person owned it for a while, and then Mick bought it for £55,000 in 1970, which at the time was probably about $200,000, something like that.
Crap. Yeah.
But then he sold it in 1979 for £200,000, which is nice appreciation for him. But the fact of the matter is, 5 years later, some Swedish guy bought it for £525,000. So in just 4 or 5 years, from 79 to 84, it went up £525,000. Then in 1988, Paul Dupuis Jr., who owned the Boston Celtics, bought it for £2.25 million. Now, that means Jagger sold it for $200,000 in 79, and less than a decade later, it's 2.2. It's gone up 11x in 9 years. English real estate was a good investment back then.
Yeah, I kind of think like that original 55 was somebody needing some cash quick. That just sounded way too low back then.
But then in 98, it was sold to Rod Stewart for £2.5 million. So 10 years from 79 to 88 goes up 11x. 10 years from 88 to 98 goes up 10%. And the guy who owned the Celtics, he put in a basketball court, so that didn't even jump it up. However, after he separated from Rachel Hunter, he sold it. And in 2012, it was sold for $15 million to the Sackler family. The Sacklers, of course, are the evil drug family that brought you things like OxyContin and forced people to take it, basically.
You got the sack part right.
And and in the London Museum, there's a big wing donated by the Sackler family. I'm like, see, that's how they get in, to make themselves legitimate while they're creating drug addicts all over the world. But the Rover was played live a little bit, and at least played the opening bars through the introduction of Sick Again on the 77 tour. And you can hear him sound checking. But never, they say never played live in its entirety. But it's a good rocker, man. It's got a great Jimmy riff. They meander a little bit at the end. I dig it. It's maybe not the greatest song on the album, but I dig it. I think it's just a cool song. And it started as an acoustic track during the Hoth sessions, which they kind of reworked into this killer rocker.
So this was one, if memory serves me correctly, that was not on the box set. So I was not super familiar with it until I started listening to this record. I love this song. It's fantastic. It's got that little drum beat at the beginning, bum, bum, bum. And then he comes in with like that phaser effect. But what I like at the beginning is the sense of space. You got Jimmy playing, and then he steps back so that JPJ can come in and play the bass, boom, 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 and then they come back in again. I love this track. You're right. It's maybe not the best song on the record, but I mean, for a track 2, you're not leaving me wanting for anything. We're still rolling through this thing.
Yeah, and a guy at Consequence of Sound described it as, the most underrated guitar lines maybe he's ever recorded for Jimmy. It's like, it's one that you kind of have to listen to a couple times, like, oh, yeah, that is actually pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, because it was supposed to be acoustic when they're recording at Brawny R, he kind of had to rework it and said, all right, well, the guitar was lost because of Nevison, but it was salvaged by Harwood. Nevison's like, no,
I was going to say, not according to Rod
Nevison.
Nevison. He's like, I never even saw this. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, well, you were kind of there working on it, Rod. So, okay.
Yeah. So Harwood fixed it or whatever. But yeah, it's another killer one. We're just kind of rolling here. It's like, okay, kick it off. We're rock and rolling. We're not stopping.
The first side of this, what is it, 4 tracks?
3.
Yeah, okay, so for the first side of this is just killer.
It is killer. I know. Now, I never had the album or the cassette. I always had the CD. So it's the first 6 songs that are the first CD. But that to me was the greatest CD, the greatest, just like, okay, you get an album, that's it, was the best ever. But we got to move on to the 3rd track, which is In My Time of Dying.
Okay.
At over 11 minutes, it is the longest in their catalog.
Okay, so what you got to ask yourself is, conceptually, do you want to hear Jimmy Page play the slide guitar for 11 minutes? And the answer is, holy shit, yes. This is
hell yes.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
And
it starts slow, right?
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. You can't hit me. You got to warm me up to this because it's going to get going here. But while we're starting here, because you kind of caught me on the Firm episode about the Dan Electric 3021. So let's just talk about that for just a second. That's the black and white guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I guess actually it's kind of in the world of guitars a little bit on the dumpy side. It's made out of like what is it, like breastboard or something? Let me see, where do I have that? But it's light and it's kind of cheap and it's really good for playing open tuning and slide guitar. So a Masonite body. So it's a hollow body Masonite guitar, which is cheapo. It's not even real wood, I don't think. And the pickup configuration, that's why he loved this thing. That's why he played the slide on it. And it's got to be, honestly, like after a while, especially if you got the double neck and those Les Pauls, those are heavy guitars. You want a little bit of a break too.
Yeah, you're right. And he can play a little bit of the bow on it if he wants to.
Probably, yeah.
Scratch it a little bit if he wants to.
Yeah.
But this is based on some old blues, so it's the 4 of them get the writing credit, plus Blind Willie Johnson.
Jesus, Make Up My Dying Bed.
Yes, and honestly, when he's singing throughout the song, oh my Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh my he doesn't really say Jesus really clearly. As a kid hearing this, I didn't think he was talking about Jesus. But I wasn't sure exactly what he was talking about, because later in the song, as pointed out to me by a girl named Georgie, who we knew in college.
Oh, yes.
He's singing, oh, Georgina. Oh, Georgina. I'm like, yeah, but he wasn't singing that before. What was he singing before? It was, oh, my Jesus, because he's thinking he's going to see St. Peter or whatever. And that's kind of the story. It's like when it really starts to pick up, and jam, that's kind of, I think, the story of him like going to heaven. It's like, is he going to make it and all that kind of stuff. But when the riffing starts and Bonham's killing it and Plant's crying for St. Peter, oh, that's good stuff, man. That's so good. And then the slide between 5 minutes and 5:40,
just filthy.
It is hot as it can be, man. Who else can play slide like that? Most people are playing slide to slow it down. Like, here's something, isn't that cool? Like, David Gilmour doesn't play slide like that. Eric Clapton doesn't play slide like that.
I mean, I'm thinking about, like, when you say who's the best of all time, like, you probably have to put Duane Allman in there. And I mean, he plays, but it's like slow. I don't ever remember him playing anything like this. So, I mean, not to diminish anything that Allman ever did, but yeah, Page is right up there with those guys.
Yes, his black and white Dan Electro shorthorn guitar, which he also used for White Summer and Kashmir. Mm-hmm. So much killer slide through the whole thing, and Bonham's he's so killer.
I really feel bad for whoever had to do the drum tech for him, because just like, is there anything left after he gets done? We got to put these drum kit back together again after you just beat it into the ground.
But you got to be ready for this. This is like 11, 12 minutes. I mean, this you can't just sit still for this. I know it's slow to begin with, and people who are unfamiliar are like, oh, okay, I'll slow down. I'll sit down for this one. You're going to have to stand back up pretty soon, man. Otherwise, you're going to miss the best guitar work. The slide work is unbelievable. Yeah, and John Paul Jones is on the bass. This is my Earl's Court notes is Page has got the Dan Electro, JPJ is on the bass, Plant is still Plant at this point. He can still belt it out. He doesn't sing like this anymore. He didn't sing like this in the 90s. This is when he's still in his 20s. He's still the golden god, and he can still belt it out.
While he's smoking. Is ridiculous
Apparently.
to me. Yeah. I mean, like you understand this is what you do for a living, but you want to smoke cigarettes. All right, cool. Go ahead.
But of course they used a couple of takes, and then on the original, there's a cough at the end. That's the one we're going to use, isn't it? That was not on the original CD that I got back in 1988 or whenever it was. They clipped that off of there.
I wonder if
I guess they figured it was a mistake.
Yeah, like you don't want to listen to this. Yeah, we'll just clean this up for you. But yeah, no, that's exactly what you want.
But they wanted to leave that on there to show that they cared about quality. That they're like, yeah, look, we had different takes, and we're giving you the best one. We're trying to make this as like Page wasn't way into heroin. Yes, Bonham was a partier, but he wasn't drinking all day, every day. They were still adamant about putting out the best product that they possibly could and having you be freaked out. I mean, yeah, they played this in 75 and 77. So, I mean, that's an epic. Just play an 11, 12-minute song in the middle of a 2-hour show. That's kind of a big deal. Cough.
Come over, listen then.
That would be a big deal just to hear it played live. Like if you were there and experiencing that, you'd be like, I need to sit down for a minute because that was intense. Can we take like 5 minutes and just regroup?
But I mean, this is what shows you how amazing Jimmy really was back in the day. I mean, unbelievable how he's playing that slide. That's what I would just show people. Like, look at what he could do then. This is what I would show people. Like, who's the best? It's Jimmy Page, and this is why. Look at him slide up, slide down, slide low, slide. He's all over the place.
So that brings up another point then. And even Page said himself, when you play live, things aren't always the same, kind of, make stuff up. So if you're Bonham and Jones, you kind of just have to follow along. And if he's going to do something different, you can't get caught off guard. Like You're just going with the group. So it just shows you how they were so locked in that whatever Page was going to do, they were going to go with it.
Yeah. And there's some stuff that's a little different. Like, Bonham didn't do the fill there like he did on the, the studio or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's what you have to do. Jimmy's doing his thing. You guys have to kind of keep it going and come back together when it's time.
Yeah. If he wanders off, just give him a bass to come back to.
Yeah. So that's side one. Those are three killer songs. Side one.
Honestly, you could just stop there and just say, that's it, folks. That's fantastic.
But we're not. Of course, that was recorded 74.
Just getting started.
Headley Grange. Flip over to side 2. Here's Houses of the Holy, which should have been the title track of the last album from 73. It was the May 72 at Olympic sessions. It was basically finished. It's one that they didn't have to rework too much. And their excuse for not putting it on Houses was it sounded too much like Dancing Days. And I grant them, it does. Yeah. It's pretty similar, right? And they thought Dancing Days was better. I disagree. I like this better than Dancing Days. That's where we differ. Because they played Dancing Days a lot, especially on that tour. I think that this is the better song, but that's just me. The 72, this does not sound like the stuff that they did at 74 Headley Grange. Jimmy's guitar is different on this than it was at 74 Headley Grange.
So then you wonder, too, if maybe this wasn't as finished as it was, would they have messed with it a little bit? But they just said, it's good enough. Just throw it on there and let's go. I'm glad that they didn't put it on Houses of the Holy because, it sounds very similar to Dancing Days. And that would have been confusing and kind of redundant on that record, especially with only 8 tracks. Or if you'd have left one of them off there and had this be the 8th track, that would have been a little confusing.
It should be on Houses of the Holy. I mean, it sounds more like it.
That was very confusing as a young person just discovering Led Zeppelin. Wait a minute. They had a record called Houses of the Holy. But they didn't put this song on it. No. They put it on the next record. Okay. Gotcha.
That makes a lot of sense. just a Delta T digital delay? I don't know.
Okay.
It's kind of a funky jam. They didn't play it. They didn't play it live. They never played Houses of the Holy live.
That's crazy.
I mean, I think Robert Plant did it with Band of Joy in 2010. Jimmy tested it with the Black Crowes, but they never played it live. And there's a little cowbell on here from John Bonham. I always thought it was, "Are you dizzy when you're stoned?" It's not. It's, "Are you dizzy when you stall?"
Okay. What are we stalling on?
I don't know.
Oh.
But you're squeaking. You can hear, they say you can hear the squeak of Bonham's. I don't know if it's the bass drum or it's the high, whatever. You can hear the squeak of something. And like, you can't hear that. It's too loud. You can't hear that. And then I went and listened to it really closely. I'm like, yeah, you can hear a squeak in there. You can, like, he's stomping on it, and you can hear, you really gotta listen. But yeah, I mean, but it's the world is spinning faster. Are you dizzy when you stall? Like, you're going too fast and you stall.
Okay.
But I never.
I always thought it was stone too, because I mean, hey, that's what those guys did, right?
But it rhymes with "Will you heed thy master's call?" So we probably should have, but I'm sorry. I mean, I'm
Stone
thinking
was more fun.
Stone made more sense, and stall, you're not in a car, I don't get it. But it's kind of simple lyrics, I would say. I mean, let me take you to the movie. Can I take you to show? Let me be yours ever truly. Can I make your garden grow? Which is probably sex.
Listen, here's the deal. If you ever think to yourself, what are they talking about? It's always sex. Always. And we're going
Always.
to talk about that on the next one too.
From the house of the holy, we can watch the white doves go. From the door comes Satan's daughter.
Ooh.
And it only goes to show. And I love the riff. I really do. I always have. It just baffled me why it wasn't on Houses of the Holy. But I liked it. And it's a good opening track to side two, right? I mean, it's not super
absolutely.
heavy, but it's got a good
actually,
groove to it.
And actually, yeah, like you're saying, after In My Time of Dying, you kind of need something that I don't need anything heavy. I just need something kind of easy, because that was intense.
It's a little lighter. Yeah. I mean, it's a rock song, but it's still a little lighter, right? Okay. Well, now we go to Trampled Leather Fort, which was a 74 Headley Grange, and JPJ got in on the co-writing, and it was actually the only single that they offered off of the album, backed with Black Country Woman.
Yeah, which was, I guess, kind of a scam, because they didn't sell the actual singles. If you were the record store, you had to buy a certain number of copies. And once you did, they gave you a couple of the singles. So what was this? Trample Underfoot and Black Country Woman.
That's right.
So like, if you could get your hands on that, it was super rare.
Well, if anyone can, it's rarevinyl.com, and if you find it, whatever conditions it's in, you can use code UGLY to save yourself 10% off of it. They have so much Led Zeppelin stuff, it's unbelievable. You go buy $1,000 worth of cool Led Zeppelin stuff there and not be disappointed in it. It was released in several countries legitimately. Like, you can find the Netherlands orange version of it, I think, a little easier than you can maybe the US version of it. The beat is kind of staccato in some places.
It just starts off with that bump 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 bum, and then Bonham just comes in and just kicks you right in the ass. Yeah.
It only went to 28 on Cashbox and 38 on the Billboard in the U.S. Didn't really go much very well, and probably because of what you said. You can't get your hands on it all that easily. But they played this. They loved it, and they played it all through 75, all through 77, even every tour until 1980. I guess the 80 was just a little different. I got to get that Bonzo's final. I've got that bootleg here. It was performed during the opening Olympic ceremony in London in 2012. As part of a selected playlist. Of course, Jimmy was with some singer girl in Beijing as like the closing ceremonies. You look kind of like they do the handoff to the next place.
Yeah, okay.
Jimmy was there for that, which is pretty big time if you ask me. But it's cool. And the rough mix was called Brandy and Coke, which you get on the 2015 remaster. But Jimmy is on fire again on this one. And Robert's there right next to him.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them just firing.
And what I like is when they do the kind of the stop, and then you just have the keyboard bam, 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 and they go back into it. Yeah, just that little bit. They kind of pull you back, and then bam, punch you in the face again.
And he's got wah wah and reverse echo on the guitar from producer Jimmy Page on there, just to make it sound a little cool. This is an extended jam at Earl's Court. Like, this isn't just the 5.5 minutes. No, they jam on this for like 10 minutes or something like that. You know, it's Jimmy's on Les Paul, JPJ's on his electric piano or whatever this thing is, and then they jam, and you can see Bonham's back there just kind of keeping the beat, just letting Jimmy do his thing, and Jimmy's a master. He's on the Les Paul. He's just killing it on this one. I'm like, God, I'm so glad they have this for me to watch.
But what were they talking about, though? I don't get it. Pump your gas, rev all night long. I don't. Oh, wait.
Talking about sex again. They're talking about sex again.
It's a song about a car. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. He's talking about his dipstick. But I mean, there is some groovy leather trim. I like the way you hold the road. Mama, it ain't no sin. That's what I'm talking about. Talking about love. If they're ever talking about love or dancing or, check that heavy metal underneath your hood. Baby, I can work all night. Believe I got the perfect tools. Factory air condition. Heat begins to rise. Guaranteed to run for hours. Mama, you're the perfect size. Talking about love. That is beautiful. But it's not the last song on this side or on the CD. There's one more.
Hi, this is Mick Wall, and you are listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
So, it's going to be something that's easy to listen to, maybe nice and sweet, no problems.
Something that haunting, I think, would be better. And John Bonham got a co-write on Kashmir. I did not know that. But that is worth some money to his estate, I would say. Because, I mean, look, I could probably go overboard on the hyperbole about Kashmir. But this is one that has stood the test of time. This is one that still gets played everywhere. This is one that you hear it, and it's instantly. First riff, okay, that's Kashmir by Led. You don't even have to go that far. You go, that's Kashmir. I need two notes to name that tune. It's, how would you describe this epic? Something that I guess Robert wrote the words to when he was traveling through Morocco or something like that.
Yeah, that's the note that I have. I have it. And up until this point, there really isn't anything that they take a break. I mean, even Houses of the Holy, like that's kind of a light, fluffy song, but it's still hard. I have slow but brutal. I mean, this thing is it's just epic. And I was thinking about, like, when I was going through these tracks, I'm like, yeah, I've heard this a million times. Yeah, I'm kind of sick of that. But if you listen to it, you're like, this is awesome. This still it's just so over the top. It doesn't sound like anything else they'd ever done before. This is brand new. It's basically it's not basically, it is the end of side 2 of the first record.
End of the first compact disc, yeah.
And it's just, it just holds up so well.
And it fits in with everything else.
Yeah.
It's not like this is this huge outlier. Yeah, it's different. It doesn't sound like anything else. You're right. But it still makes perfect sense within the context of all these other songs, especially from 74 Headley Grange.
Yeah.
This is the majesty of rock. This is the majesty of Led Zeppelin. And because JPJ needed some rest at the end of 73, he got to the sessions late. He kind of almost quit in 74, but he's like, all right, I'm fine, I'm coming. So he didn't get a co-writing credit like the other guys did, even though he put the Mellotron on there, which is an important part of it.
Right, and I think he
did the string arrangements.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He wrote those.
Yeah.
He should have gotten a writing credit for the song.
You'd think, right? I'd be a little bit out of shape, especially this song. It wasn't like something no one's ever heard before. This is one of the hallmarks. Like, they played this live on every tour after this, right?
They never missed this. No,
yeah.
This was an important part of their set after it was recorded. He used the same kind of tuning as he did on White Mountain and Black Mountain Side. And he probably used the Dan Electro on this, although I have seen him play it with a Les Paul. I'm just going to say this real fast. When Come With Me came out, I thought it was an abomination.
Yes.
I still feel that way.
Yeah, it was. Okay. Why do you say that?
Because fuck that dude.
Right.
Seriously, I never liked he think he was still Puff Daddy at that point. I don't know if he changed his name to P. Diddy yet at that point, but I never liked him. And it's one thing to sample something like sample a little bass line, sample a drum beat or something like that. This riff, you basically just took the whole song and put your own bullshit lyrics over it. It's not, and I understand Jimmy went with him to play like on Saturday Night Live because he wants to be relevant again. The thing's selling well. You have to pay Zeppelin for their use of the song. He wants to give it some legitimacy, but I don't know why. Because I'm like, that's bullshit. That's not just taking a little bit of it. That's you're using the whole song. That's crap. It's crap.
And I understand, like, you can't, if you're the songwriter, you can't do anything about it. They have to pay you,
right? But
you can't tell them no. But the fact that he was in the video with him and on Saturday Night Live, I was like, oh, don't do this, Jimmy. Jimmy. Don't lend your, I totally approve of this. Don't do that.
I know. But now what's Jimmy supposed to do? Is he supposed to come out and say, hey, I do not back people who sleep with teenage girls? I'm like, are you sure about that, Jimmy? Are you 100% sure about that? Because that's part of your lore too, and I don't want to get way into it here, but Laurie Maddox, Jimmy, Laurie Maddox. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know anything about anything, but what I am going to guess, and this is just me guessing, if you knew what someone, say, like a Cameron Crowe knows, your head would explode. Like, I think it's things like you couldn't even, like, I didn't even know I couldn't even imagine that. Yeah, that happened, and a lot.
And, some states had different laws. There's some states where 16 is the age of consent. If you go back into the 60s and 70s, I think it's lower in some places. It kind of depends on where you are. And some people are just more mature. It's just Jimmy wasn't one of them. That's why when he was 29, he's got a 14-year-old girl holed up in his hotel room. Don't let her out of the room because they didn't want her talking to anybody because she was a little moron. Like, are you dating Jimmy Page? Yeah, it's so great. Yeah. He takes me everywhere. Yeah. No. I don't know this girl, And some of her stories aren't straight. She says she lost her virginity to Jimmy Page. Then she comes out in a story and says, well, no, I lost my virginity to David Bowie and his wife. And then Pamela DeBar is like, no, you didn't. I know. And so there's this kind of back and forth there. And a lot of people write it off like, okay, look, they're teenagers. If you're 20 and she's 17, it's not a big deal. If you're 19 and she's 15, because you could have been in high school at the same time, it's not a big deal. And it's just a different time. And let's just not talk about it because they made their choices and blah, blah, blah. But now, after Me Too, and now like Jeffrey Epstein, it's like, it doesn't matter if she went willingly. It doesn't matter if it was her idea. It doesn't matter if she attacked you. She's half your age and she's 14, It's, we try not to bring that stuff up. He still likes young girls. Scarlett Sabin is 45 years younger than he is.
Oh, my God.
I'm serious. She's like 20 years younger than his daughter named Scarlett. I mean, it's kind of... But back to the song.
Yes. Okay.
The part where it's not even at the end. It's kind of, in the middle. It's like, trying to find where I've been. And he's just kill him. They hold that thing, and all of a sudden underneath him, they stop and come back to...
Yeah.
That gets me every time. I'm like, that is amazing. That is an unbelievable song. Despite everybody being awesome on this, Bonham may be the man of the match on this track.
It's just, I have the drums are sweeping. Like, it's just this epic when it comes through. And I can't imagine picking this thing up in 1975. Obviously, you probably bought it sight unseen, right? Because you're a huge Zeppelin fan. You put this on and you just say, I've never heard anything like this. This is just, it's so epic. I can imagine it was one of those things where like you'd call every other person that you knew down in the basement.
You gotta come over.
You gotta listen to this on the hi-fi. This is unbelievable.
And it is. And that concludes one of the best LPs, side 1 and 2 or CD ever. So epic, such amazing guitar riffs, so good. But technically, we're only halfway done, and maybe not even halfway done by number of songs. We're going to stop there and come back for part 2. That's just part 1 of Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin, the 1975 double album by the greatest, biggest rock band on the planet. And obviously, it's hard for me and Jackson to conceal our love and admiration for Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham. Their music was just the cornerstone to all the music that we would eventually grow to love. And even though we didn't grow up as teenagers or weren't aware of this when it came out, by the time we did become teenagers, we became incredibly aware of it and how amazing their music was. And this album in particular really showed off their power and the breadth of what they can do. They're not just a blues-based rock band. They're not just a band that can make some nice folk songs. They can stretch out, do proggier things. John Paul Jones can play all sorts of different instruments to give a lot of different textures. And Jimmy's playing was just out of this world at this time. And those 6 songs, Custard Pie, Rover, In My Time of Dying, Houses of the Holy, Trampled Underfoot, and Kashmir, well, that's one incredible album of music. And by itself would have been a diamond seller. But of course, there was a part 2, and we're going to get into that next week. We'll give it the same treatment. We'll let you know when and where it was recorded, who wrote it, give you as many stories on it as we can. Sometimes we review albums that we love, but maybe they aren't that big. Sometimes we review albums that we didn't know very well. Occasionally we review albums we don't like, but this one we love, and it's always been huge, and it's still huge to this day as far as its influence on rock bands and individuals around the world. And there's a lot of big Zeppelin fans out there. There's a lot of things to know. So we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? Email us and let us know. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can let us know the bands, the albums, the concerts, the DVDs, the books, the movies, the rock properties you want to hear us talk about here on the show. And we need you to download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Those downloads are the lifeblood of growing the show, helping us to get more guests on, rising up the charts. And if you're thinking about it, another great way to help the show is to leave a 5-star review. It doesn't really matter where you leave it. Just put in 5 stars and a little blurb about what you like about the show. It helps us find more rock and rollers like you. And if you send it to us or we get word of it, we might just read it on an episode. Thanks as always to Pantheon Podcast for making us part of the family. And thanks to our sponsor, RareVinyl.com, who has tons of amazing Led Zeppelin stuff. Go to RareVinyl.com, use the code UGLY, save yourself 10% off one entire order. That's it for this week, folks. Obviously, part 2 is coming next week, and we've got a new First Concert Memories coming your way soon. So stay tuned. And to all you rockers all around the world, be cool and keep doing what you do to keep rock alive.